In the words of the prolific and prophetic Lucille Clifton, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill you and has failed. On this balmy sunny day, you 2024 graduates stand as a testament to the fact that one can be bruised but not broken, daunted but not destroyed, persecuted but not powerless, and try as they might, and y'all, they will try. Bigots cannot banish us. Courts cannot silence us. And I know that as much as they try, Congress cannot legislate us away. And I will throw this in for free. And y'all, just because I can, I'm gonna throw this in for free. No preacher can pray us away. And so once again, I want to say with as much conviction as I can muster, which as much sass as I can embody, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill you and has failed. Because I am a recovering Black Baptist preacher, I have to ask you to simply turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, after all that I've been through, I'm still here. Still standing. And still looking good. I know that's right. Well, let me hurry along, class of 2024. I count it a privilege and an indescribable joy to be in this place and on these grounds with such a compelling cadre of community and friends. I'd like to express my whole heart and unadulterated gratitude to the planning committee for doing such a phenomenal job in putting together this event. To the faculty, staff, and alumni, I want to acknowledge your presence as well. But I'd also like to thank the honorees of the hour, the class of 2024, for the distinguished honor of serving as your keynote speaker. In the spirit of my ancestors and in keeping with the hand-clapping, toe-tapping faith tradition that raised me, I'd like to take this time to go ahead and testify. Queerness haunted me for years. It lurked in the shadows of my life with little comfort for my convenience. I rejected its alluring embrace with every fiber of my being. But the more I resisted, the larger it loomed. Desperate for relief, I found refuge in a place that promised deliverance, the Black church. I got it, but not in the way that you may think. As the son of a Southern preacher and the grandson of a Holy Ghost-filled, patois-speaking grandmother, the Black church was my second home. The markings of my adolescence are littered throughout it. I played my first bass guitar at the age of 12. I even started preaching at the age of 14. With all of these experiences under my belt, I was on my way to becoming a well-regarded member of the Black clerical class. The number of three-piece suits in my closet ballooned, and I had those Stacey Adams shoes too, y'all. I was on my way to becoming a preacher of some historic Black Baptist church until queerness manifested. In the twinkling of an eye, the church that raised and reared me nearly turned its back on me. In an instant, I was betwixt and between, both within and outside of this tradition I called home. I suffered in silence, knowing that voicing my truth would cause me to be othered. So the thought of being banished from my community instilled me with fear. Fear that compelled me to adopt ways of being that did not honor my dynamism. Shrouded in shame and steeped in self-loathing, I justified the barrage of biblical bullets assaulting my psyche. I normalized words laced with homophobia and scriptural interpretations doused with transphobia. These insidious indignities greeted me at the door of the church. It ushered me into the sanctuary, and it berated me in the pews. In places where love and freedom was supposedly able to abound, they were asking me to wrap myself in shame as if it was the price of my admission. The pain of familial rejection and spiritual rejection, y'all, nearly crushed me. It left me aching for home, longing for meaning, and searching for purpose with my newly found queerness. The place from which I staked my sense of self and self-worth was destabilized. And I'll go ahead and walk out on a long, shaky limb and say that I'm not the only one who has had to, in some way, reimagine the thing that I once called sacred. For some of you, perhaps it was challenging notions of the nuclear family, recognizing that within it were folk who only loved parts of you, the parts of you that they could deem as palatable, as legible. So you found refuge in an adopted parental home. For others, perhaps it was unmooring yourself from one-dimensional gender-based ideas of what fulfillment and success looks like. For me, as a good old church boy, I was taught that the Bible is the only sacred text, the preeminent source of universal wisdom and divinity. This central and long-held theological tenet was cemented in my faith. I saw the stories of the Apostle Paul and Peter and Timothy as the only sacred text. I accepted this premise, y'all, believing that the only source of sacredness and goodness and beauty was housed outside of myself, but not within myself. The catastrophic consequence of this insidious notion is that it led me to adopt dehumanizing dispositions, one wherein my own sense of inherent worth was tenuous at best and illegitimate at worst. I carried this disposition around everywhere, y'all, including my time here at Harvard, incessantly wondering if I was capable enough, smart enough, hardworking enough, well-dressed enough, put together enough. Ultimately, y'all, I was simply asking the question, am I enough? I spent entire course loads working for my worthiness, searching for it in my papers and in my presentations and even in my casual banter. But try as I might, no hard-earned A could quench my thirst for worthiness. No well-deserved financial scholarship could mitigate my musings of inadequacy. No scholarship could stymie my sullied sense of self. In my quest for worthiness, I all but eliminated the very real possibility that the thing I was desperately seeking was not outside of myself, but within myself. It was only in becoming acquainted with the truth of my queer self, the parts of me I was told to deem as disposable, as unworthy of care and community, that I discovered my inherent worthiness. With the full, unapologetic embracing of my queerness came the irreducible, irrefutable, downright immutable fact that I'm fly, y'all. And here's what I want you to know. I stopped working for my worthiness and I started resting in it. I started luxuriating in it, recognizing that there were many things that Harvard could provide me with. An incomparable network, an intellectual laboratory, a cerebral playground, lifelong friends. But one thing that no Harvard professor could bestow, one thing that no university dean could confer, one thing that no university president could defer was my divinity. So, I see some of you looking at the clock, and I recognize that my time is running short. Class of 2024, I know that you thought you were only graduating this week, but you are indeed doing that. But I also want to submit to you that you are also becoming wisdom keepers, torch bearers, freedom fighters, way makers, community builders, chain breakers, and liberation seekers. And as you peer through the window panes of time and engage in the radical act of becoming, I invite you to resoundingly reject the notion that sacredness is only reserved for normative structures, practices, and ways of being. That which is sacred extends beyond stained glass windows and clerics with a collar and heteronormative standard bearers. In sharing my story, I named that I wrestled with my faith and sexuality. And I did find deliverance, but here's how. It was not through the suppression of my voice and my story. It was not through the adoption of death-dealing theologies which sought to snuff out my power and my value. I found deliverance through the life-giving, shame-thwarting embrace of my own sacred canon, a collection of sacred texts from which I drew strength and solace and staying power. And some of you are probably wondering if those texts were the Apostle Paul or Peter or Timothy. Let me just stop right here and say, hell no. It was in the stories of Marsha P. Johnson, who threw the bricks at Stonewall, the stories of Pauli Murray, who crafted and curated the legal infrastructure for Brown v. Board of Education. It was the stories of Bayard Rustin, who planned the March on Washington. It was the stories of James Baldwin, who decided to protest with his pen. In these stories, I found the divine. And she had her hands outstretched, beckoning me to stand with the oppressed, to speak out against genocide, to challenge systems of oppression. I think that's a good place to clap. Y'all, it's in these stories that I actually found my power. My queer and trans ancestors, individuals who decided to act up and speak up and stand up and show up and glow up in the midst of unbelievable opposition. Through the testimonies of everyday people, the flamboyant queer organist in a black church, a defiantly sassy gay choir member, a fashionable lesbian auntie, and a gorgeous trans baddie slaying for the gods. It was in all of them that I found God, that I found the thing that was sacred. It was in those spaces where I discovered that we have been everywhere, in every sector, in every faith tradition, in every school, in every community. We were there. We are here, strutting and sashaying and sauntering in the midst of sophomoric and silly and utterly asinine attacks against our humanity. And so my time is up, but hear me clearly. You are an embodied sacred text, one from which the world can learn, not just about how we can relate to and one another, but how we relate to and with those whom we see as other. You, in all of your brilliance and beauty and brokenness and bounty, are now an indispensable part of our collective sacred canon here at Harvard and in your communities. Through living your truth, you are giving way to a new narrative, one which sees the stories of queer and trans and non-binary folk as being worthy of being enshrined in our sacred consciousness. It's in your stories, class of 2024, that will aid us with the tools to ensure that no one is outside of our circle of care and compassion. Much like texts that have come before us and even before you, we will look to you for liberated futures, for new social norms capable of bearing the weight of our glorious diversity, for new tools and technologies to disrupt the status quo and the wiles of empire. And so while it is true that this chapter in your life has been punctuated by a series of graduations, which y'all might be tired of, it is my fervent and earnest belief that the best is still yet to come. And know that there are many waiting to read the text of your lived experience, knowing that they have something to learn and you have something to teach us. Yes, you were taught by some of the most renowned professors in academia. Yes, you were mentored by top-class faculty. Yes, you were gifted with the premier education. But I never want you to forget, in the words of the famed sociologist and Harvard graduate W.E.B. Du Bois, I can assure you that the honor was indeed Harvard's. Congratulations, class of 2024, and thank you for the honor of being your keynote speaker.